All right, let's get into fiscal cliff discussions. The lot going on with the fiscal cliff, of course. January 1st, some automatic spending cuts and rollbacks of tax decreases set to take place. We had the way this reporting has evolved has been fascinating. First, we heard that John Boehner was, quote, caving on millionaire tax increases. Now, of course, they're not really tax increases. They're just returns to the previous rates before the Bush tax cuts. And of course, also, he's not really caving in the sense that if he does nothing, if he doesn't agree to anything, those rates are going to go up anyway, aren't they, Louis? Because they're just going to be automatically rolled back on January 1st.
Presumably, yeah.
Yeah. So Speaker John Boehner making a big deal, and right-wingers making a big deal that he was caving in some way. But wait a second. So what you're saying is, I'll give up something I'm going to lose on anyway, if only you'll give me something much bigger that's got nothing to do with it. Sounds about right. What a good negotiation.
That's usually how these negotiations go.
And it's interesting because if you look at this week's edition of The Economist, which is not a liberal publication by any means. In fact, it's very, very conservative fiscally. The figures are there in black and white, right? Revenue has to be raised to pay for spending. Right now, federal spending is about 25% of GDP. Taxes are bringing in 16% of that. We can only assume, even in the most optimistic of cases, that we can bridge that halfway, right? Let's make up, of that 9 points, let's make up 4.5 of it on spending cuts and 4.5 of it on revenue increases. And that seems pretty reasonable to me. And what's fascinating is that even The Economist, which again, as I said, is not a left-wing magazine by any means, puts most of the blame for the current situation on George W. Bush, President number 43, who of course is basically ignored by the right in discussions about why we're even in this financial situation. But as we know, conservatives who are for small government, well, right, turns out George W. Bush blew up the entire federal financial system.
And I understand that it's important to look at history and understand why we got into this mess, but at the same time, it doesn't help us fix the problem.
Right. No
Pointing
question
the finger doesn't fix the problem, but yeah.
We have to, I think it's important, Natan, to point fingers in one sense. If you're going to decide who to listen to for solutions, you need to know if those are the same people that created the problem with the same, quote, solutions in the past.
That's true, but I really think that conservatives and the Republicans in this case have won this debate in the sense that they've made the country think that what we need to do right now for the economy is to tamp down on the deficit, which is not really backed up by what a lot of economists say. So
Right.
in a sense, they've sort of won the argument, even though Obama might win the political so-called battle.